In today's show, we're jumping into Luminar Neo. We're going to take a look at a couple of fun photo effects that we can use when editing our wildlife photos. Hey everyone, welcome into Magnolia Photography SC. I'm Jeff House and I'm a wildlife photographer in Charleston, South Carolina. So we're going to be taking a look at a product here in just a little bit called Luminar Neo. And there are two features of this program that I'm really interested in showing you today. It's the sky replacement portion of the software, as well as the Sunray feature that you can use inside of the software. And both of these can be used very creatively in your wildlife photos to add some interest and intrigue. And so I really wanted to take some time to show you these different effects that you can add to your wildlife images. Now, this is a product that is made by a company called Skylum Software, and it's something that you can go purchase from them. It's a one-time fee, and you download it, and you get updates for a certain amount of time, and you can continue to upgrade and do those things on a yearly basis to keep the most current product if you so choose. And it's pretty affordable. I think it's under $100. I haven't checked the latest price in a while. I've been using the program now here for, I don't know, maybe 6 years or so, maybe 7 years. I was using it when it came out as Luminar AI, and then they transformed it over to Luminar Neo, which is what we are currently using. But I have always liked them because I really think that they took the process of doing sky replacements and really simplified it and made it really, really easy. Sky replacements are something that have been done for a very, very long time. And they used to be done in Photoshop, and it wasn't the easiest process, especially if you were replacing skies where you had trees in the frame. As you can imagine, all those leaves on those trees, and that could really confuse the sky replacement process. So it often became very cumbersome and time consuming. And this was really eliminated with Luminar AI and their sky replacement algorithm. So really cool, really cool. I want to show you how that works today. It's really, really simple, and it's just a matter of popping in a sky that you like and then moving some sliders around, very similar to what we've been doing in Lightroom Classic during our previous videos when we were going through the editing process. But before we jump in, I have something that I want to talk about quickly, because anytime we start talking about these types of edits, right, these fun effects, sky replacement, sunrays, those types of things, we start to get into conversations that become a little bit more controversial, right? Because we always have people who are going to be on that one side that are like, hey, this is nonsense. If you're doing sky replacements, you're the devil. That's not what real photographers do. Real professionals get it right in camera and blah, 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 right? Then you have the other people on the other side of the spectrum who think anything goes, right? They think that you don't even need a camera to create photography. You can just go into the new AI features and type in osprey flying over water with a fish in its talons, and then post it online like you somehow captured this. Well, that's obviously not the right way to go, in my opinion. But I do think sky replacements are okay. I do think adding sunray effects are okay. I do think adding some of these things are okay. And I'll explain why I think that's the case in a second. But the question here for you is, what is ethical in your mind when it comes to photo editing? How much is too much, and where do you draw the lines when it comes to photo editing? And these will be very important lines for you to draw for yourself, especially if you're a newer photo editor, even an existing photo editor, because we need to kind of keep some truth to our images, I believe, right? I don't think it's okay, even if we took the person who's on the free love side of it, right, where you can create anything, even in AI, and it's a photo. No, but would it be okay if you were to capture a bird, maybe a portrait of a bird, and maybe they're not doing anything interesting, they're just standing there? So you remove that bird and maybe you put them back into the photo using AI doing something interesting. I think something like that is also wrong, right? I think we're manipulating AI and using things to create a world that never ever existed. There's nothing real about that bird whatsoever. With sky replacements, I see this as being something very different because of the fact that we are dealing with some circumstances that are well out of our control. Let me clarify what I mean. If we go out to photograph a bird, okay, we are oftentimes photographing them as they're flying through the sky or they're standing on a tree branch. And a lot of times we're trying to capture them up against the sky, right? We're trying to create this interesting photo with a beautiful sky in the background and create something that is interesting to our viewer. But we don't always get the best skies out there, right? Sometimes Mother Nature, and we've all seen it, gives us those plain white, boring skies, right? And there's really nothing about it that's interesting. Yeah, you captured a flying bird or you captured a bird, maybe even doing something on a tree branch, but with that big white sky behind it, it just kind of makes the photo look a little muddy, a little boring, right? And there's nothing really overly interesting about the image. There's also going to be other times where the bird may be on a tree branch or flying, and for whatever reason, you can't really bring out the detail in the sky. Well, the real reason is that you're trying to expose for the bird. Okay, what we know about photography when it comes to exposure and dealing with subjects and skies in the background is pretty simple. Okay, and here's how it works. If we're photographing, even if we're doing a portrait, okay, of people, it doesn't matter whether we're doing that or whether we're photographing a bird up against the sky. The sky is always, I've never seen it not be, is pretty much always the brightest part of the photo. And so our subject being a little bit darker, it becomes tricky to get a proper exposure. So the only thing we can do is one of two things, assuming that we only are holding the camera in our hands and we have no other equipment. But if we're using a camera to expose for this scene, we can either one, expose for our subject, or two, expose for the sky. Now, if we expose for our subject, they're going to be lit well. But when we do that, that bright sky is only going to get brighter. And we're going to blow out all of the detail in the sky. So if we had a beautiful blue sky that day with nice white puffy clouds, it's gone. It's gone, right? We're going to expose for the bird, and that sky will just become too bright to recognize any of those details. But what if we expose for the sky? Well, if we expose for the sky and that's the brightest part of our image, that means our subject is going to suddenly become much darker. And they're going to become just a very dark mass in the photo, or they're going to become a complete silhouette in the photo. Now, that can be used creatively, and that can create some cool images when we make them a silhouette. But if we're trying to expose for our subject and also get the sky details in there, that's what's going to happen. Our subject will drift away and fade away into a silhouette. The only way to combat this is to use external lighting. So what we would need to do to get a proper exposure on everything in a scene like this is we would take our camera and expose it for the brightest part of the image, which would be the sky. We will bring all the detail of the sky in. As I mentioned, that brings our subject into silhouette. So how we combat that is by using this external lighting, and we put a pop of flash onto our subject. That will light them up and properly expose them. That's how we get both areas of the photo properly exposed. But here's the problem. We're talking about wildlife photography. One, it would be pretty disrespectful and disruptive to the wildlife to be using elaborate lighting systems and shooting flashes, bright lights of flash at them as we're trying to take a picture. So it's really not a viable option for that reason alone. Additionally, we're talking about wildlife. Wildlife typically isn't that cooperative. They don't typically see you breaking out lights and think, I want to hang around here, right? We have to capture wildlife as they give us the moment. And that's typically very quickly. They're here 1 minute and gone the next. So we generally don't even have the time, aside from the respect issues, we don't have the time to be lighting up our subjects to get a well-lit scene and make sure the sky's lit and the subject's lit and all of that. So for those reasons, because we are forced to shoot in these conditions, I personally have no problem with sky replacements. But I will reiterate, this is something that you will need to kind of reflect on and decide what's right for you. Now, with that being said, let's jump into our editing software, and we're going to take some pictures from Lightroom Classic right into Luminar Neo, because this, yet again, is just another product that I use in conjunction with Lightroom Classic as a plugin, right? So that allows us, when we have a plugin, that allows us to take it directly from Lightroom into the editing program that we're talking about, make our edits, process the image as we want, and then return it back right into Lightroom Classic with those new edits applied. So let's take a look. Okay, so now we're in Lightroom Classic, and what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at this picture. Now, this is exactly what I was just talking about a few moments ago, right? This is a bird standing on a kind of a dead tree branch that's coming up from the ground, and we have a beautiful white sky behind it. And this kind of creates a dull image. Well, we could do some things in Lightroom to see if we could improve the sky, right? We talked a lot about masking recently, and if we click the mask button and went and we chose a masking sky, we can look at doing some things, but you can see the mask is not perfect here, right? The mask didn't go in and get all these white areas inside this tree. So if we darken this down, you can see it's really going to show where the mask didn't catch. So we would have to go through that and manually add all of those white spots to the mask, which becomes kind of a pain in the butt. But let's just for a second assume we don't have that issue. We'll just assume that everything in our sky is being grabbed inside of this mask. We're more interested in what can we do with the sky to make it more interesting. So, we could try to add some blue to it, right? We could blue it up here a little bit. That makes it a little bit more interesting compared to a white sky, but it's still a boring sky, right? There's really nothing going on here. So I'm going to delete this mask because what we can see is that there's really not a lot happening there. Let's go up here and we're going to edit in, and we're just going to come over here to edit in Luminar Neo, and we'll click on that. And we're just going to edit the copy with the Lightroom adjustments. That's how you would do that. But just like the other programs that we looked at doing this with, it's just going to take a second. It will open up inside of Luminar Neo. Now, Luminar Neo, when you first come in, it has some presets that you can choose. Basically, it's set up so that you can do kind of a one click, and it will do color adjustments and all these different things. I never really use this because as you know my philosophy when it comes to creative control. We want to retain as much creative control in our images as possible. And using these presets is really something that's meant for just kind of the very casual photographer who's really not interested in having any kind of creative freedom in their photos. So we're going to go to the Edit tab right up here at the top so that we can go into Luminar Neo. And you're going to see as we're in here, a lot of the tools that we have are tools that we will see in other editing programs, right? So if we click on the Develop tab, this is just like Lightroom Classic. We have sliders that control our exposure, our contrast, our highlights, our shadows, our blacks and whites, and so on down the line. So it offers all of those things. You can see we can do sharpness, we can do noise reduction, we can even do erasing. So if we wanted to erase some things, we could. As you see here, we have a little spot here in the sky. I'm not sure if that's a spot on my sensor or it's just something in the air. But what we can do here, this is kind of a neat feature inside of Luminar Neo, is if we had taken a photo that had power lines, we can do remove power lines, and the AI feature will recognize them and remove them. Pretty cool. But I would do like the remove dust spots if I was coming into Luminar Neo to do any other edits. And this should, in theory, remove that dust spot, and you see that it did very easily, very quickly. So it has a pretty good erase tool inside of it that I use often when I'm in here, and I like this quite a bit. You can also do things with the color, the black and white. Again, you can add a little denoise to the image. Then we go into the landscape where we can do sun rays. We can do twilight enhancer. And again, these are just all sliders if you click it, right? So if you come over here and we click on this down thing, we can add a little bit of a color to our overall image, right? So if we did the golden part, we can add that, and then we can change the amount that gets added to our photo, and it might just take a second for it to click in. But these are some interesting little effects that we can do, right? We can change the exposure of the sky, bring it down. Then we can come in here, we can change the temperature. So you just go through these sliders and you make the adjustments that you want to make. Again, very similar to what we did inside of Lightroom Classic, but this offers some different features and some different effects that you can add to your photo. So I don't want to spend a ton of time going through all of these. They do a lot of things, though, creatively, where you can do relights and add kind of a mood to your photo here. You can come in and choose a LUT, and a LUT is nothing more than really just like an effect. So we can come over here and choose that and make it darker or whatever that LUT adds to it. So these are all different things that you can do inside Luminar Neo. I would encourage you that if you're going to try this program out, that you come in and just play with these. If you do a lot of shooting of people and you're doing a lot of portrait type work, they do have some really cool effects in here for changing the lighting, as well as adding some of the blur to your background, right? The bokeh. You also hear it pronounced as bokeh. But then you can do things with the face, so you can change the color of the brightness of the pupil of their eyes, or add whiteness to their eyes, or change their eye color. You can do things to improve their skin, their body. So there's all sorts of things you can do. And then there's a couple more tools down here with contrast and colors and dodging and burning and cloning and all those good things. So again, I don't want to spend a ton of time here because that's really not our focus today. Our focus today is what can we do with sky replacements and what can we do with sun rays? Well, let's take a look at what we could do here with a sky replacement. So when you get Luminar Neo, there will be some skies that are built into the program. But what I have done over the years is there are many companies out there that sell sky bundles. And you can buy one of these and then you can just simply add them into Luminar Neo as options to choose for a sky. So if I come in here and select the sky tab, it will say for this photo, here's some ideas. You can see this has a shopping cart. So if we wanted this one, we could buy it directly through Luminar Neo. They do offer sky bundles that you can purchase through them. But generally speaking, I find you can go to a third party and you might spend a little bit more money, but you get a ton more skies. With Luminar Neo, I think most of their packs run somewhere between like 10 to 20, maybe 25 different skies that you can get. Whereas if you go third party, you might get a couple hundred skies for another, $10 or $15. So you got to look and see what they offer and see what looks good to you. But those are some options that you have. So once you have your skies loaded in, or you're just looking to choose a sky that Luminar Neo provides, you come in over here to the sky selection and you'll see there's a little down arrow. If we click that, it's going to bring up our skies and we can just cycle through these. We can do night skies and sunset skies and cloudy skies and summer skies and all these great things. And we can just really add a sky to see what it looks like. And if we overall like what the sky does, then we're going to move on to the next phase and go through the actual refinement of that sky being in the photo. So let's take a look at what we have. Maybe we do something, this was taken in the early morning, so maybe something along this line would be pretty cool. And just for sake of argument, I'm going to use this sky. We're going to say, yeah, hey, this is the one I really like. I think this is cool. Let's just stick with this. So let's say we stick with that, and now we can kind of do some different things. Now you're going to see, if you're looking here, that the bottom of the sky is coming up a little bit shy of the bottom of the photo. That's okay, because we can always crop it later on to kind of fix that. We can also mess with the sky orientation. So that will be the first thing that we do. We're going to look at the sky orientation. Again, another down arrow. So click that. What that's going to do is we can move it horizontally, So it's going to take a little second here. And you can see I can't go down any further with it. I can go up, right? That doesn't really look good. So we'll just leave it where it is. So the horizontal positioning isn't going to really get us anywhere. This is what you're going to do. You're just going to try these sliders to see what happens. And then you're going to figure out what looks good, what you like, and then you're just going to set it. The vertical position is going to, see, look at that. That brings it in a little bit closer to us. And we can bring it in way in, and we pretty much get rid of the sky, or we can bring it way out, and that doesn't look good because we have that real dramatic line. So I think I kind of like just bringing it in a little bit like this. And I think that looks pretty cool. And then what we can do is we have more horizontal positioning again, so we can move this a little bit more left or right, and see what we like here. I think I kind of like something a little bit like that. So we'll just leave it like that for argument's sake. So then I'm just going to close that. And then we're going to come down to the mask refinement tab. And when we click that, we get more options. So what this is doing is, we have this part of the picture where we have the tree and the sky in there, and it's not exactly perfect. So what we're going to do is what I have found is we're going to move these sliders to fine tune our mask. So if we take a look at this particular part of the tree where you see this big pink blob, okay, I want you to kind of focus on that for a second, because we're going to see the change taking place as we use these sliders. So if I take this global slider and I move it to the left, you can see it kind of makes the blob a little bit worse. That's not really helping to refine the mask. It's hurting it. So if I move it to the right, what does it do? Yeah. Now we're getting rid of that, right? Now we're improving the mask. And so I'm going to just keep going over here. And I usually wind up right around 100% or very close to 100% when I'm using this tool to refine my skies in Luminar Neo. So just a little thing to keep in mind. So I like that. Then we have the close gap. So this is going to be kind of manipulating the sky around like the tree branches and stuff like that. And I think if you look at this tree branch right here and around this wooden part, we're going to start to see kind of some of the effects that it's having. So if I go to the left, you can see it's kind of like shrinking the tree, but that's hurting it. It's not making it look good. It's making the tree look thinner. So if I come over this way, it's kind of making the tree look a little bushier, right? So we can keep going and we can try to figure out what looks good here. And I don't like going too far because there's like a fine spot here. You see that we get some white in that tree right here. So I want to kind of look, if we come back and if we go forward again, I kind of like this right around the 30 mark. The tree looks nice and bushy. This looks kind of filled in with the blue from the sky back here. So I like how that mask is kind of impacted on the whole picture. And then lastly, we can just fix the detail. So again, we're going to go left to see what happens. There's really not much happening there, and right. And if you really pay attention to like these little branches right here, you can see a little bit of what happens with them as we move that. See how they're coming back and coming in. So some of them are being covered by the sky. So we're just going to go all the way to the right, which is going to expose those a little bit more and bring them back into the photo. That is all we're doing with the mask refinement tools. We're just going left and right to see what impact it has on the photo and what looks best. There's no science here again, right? You're going to see this conversation a lot with photo editing. It's not science, it's an art. And we just got to play around with these sliders, play around with these sliders and massage the photo while using them a little bit to get it where we want to. Okay, so now we're going to go into scene relighting. This is typically not a section that I use very often, if at all, because it really just kind of relights the scene. And I really don't like the effect that it has. And, this is for if there was a human in there. So I pretty much just never use this scene relighting. I've never found it all that wonderful or helpful. Then we can do reflection. So if we had a scene where this bird was standing on a tree branch over water, or we had some sort of body of water in there, we might be able to use this to our benefit. We might be able to add some like reflection. If we added a sky and we could see its reflection in the water, we could use this tool to maybe show that reflection a little bit more or reduce it a little bit more in the water below. So that can be a useful tool. I've used that one in the past. And the other thing you can do is you can use this slider to blur the water. And that does work pretty good in some cases as well. Again, another tool that I've used to blur out water in the photo and just make it a little bit glassier looking. So reflection can be helpful, but obviously, again, we're not using it in this photo as we don't have that. So the last one that I will use, though, are the sky adjustments tab. So really what we've done is we've used sky orientation, we've done the mask refinement, and then I'm usually down here in sky adjustments. So one thing that we can do is add a little defocus to our sky. What we can tell is that the tree behind our bird is a little out of focus, right? There's a little blurriness there. So it would be weird if we had something behind our subject out of focus, but then all of a sudden our sky was in focus, right? There's going to be a little bit of an uncomfortableness and awkwardness for the viewer when you go from a subject in focus, a tree out of focus, and a sky in focus. It doesn't make sense to our minds. So I would, in this case, add some defocus to the sky, and I'm going to go up to about 40%, and I'm going to let that sit for a second, and I'm going to see how that looks. And we can see the difference right there with what that does. So if I take it back, we'll take a look at what the sky looks like. I'm looking mainly down in this area because I feel like we see it more there because there's a little bit more definition in those clouds to begin with. But I'm going to go up to that 40 again. And I think that looks pretty decent. I think we can get away with a little bit more of the defocus tool. So I'm going to go up to 60 now and see how I like that. And I think I like that even a little better. I might try 70. And I still like that. I'm going to stick with that. So that is where I'm going to hang with the defocus. And this is, again, all by eye, right? There's no science to this. This is strictly how I like it, what I like to look at. And it makes sense because now our subject's in focus and everything behind it is out of focus. I'm not going to do anything with the grain, and I'm not going to add any atmospheric haze. We could do that if we wanted to. You can see it getting a little whiter at the top. I don't need to do that. Nothing I'd be interested in doing for this picture. I could come down here, though, and change the amount of warmth in the photo. So if I go to the left, it's going to cool it off. If I go to the right, it's going to warm it up. That's kind of a cool effect right there. I like that little warmer part. And being a sunrise in the summer, I might bump this up right here and keep this right around the 60 mark because I like the warmth that created. That looks really rich to me. And then the last thing that I'm going to use is the brightness slider. And I find this to be one of the most valuable sliders when it comes to sky replacements, because I don't know that right now this looks like the most believable sky replacement. So I think that by adding a little brightness to it, making it a little bit brighter, we can kind of mute down those colors a little bit. And I think it makes it more believable. At least that's the experience that I've had with sky replacements in Luminar. So let's take a look. If we were to decrease the brightness, right, we're really decreasing the exposure here on the image. And I think it makes the sky look a little too unnatural for my liking. But I think if we go brighter overall, one, we brighten up our subject a little bit more, and we'll take that further in editing. We really haven't addressed our subject yet. We're really just worried about the sky replacement here. But I think if we go a little bit brighter, you can see what it does here, right? It makes the sky a little bit brighter. It just mutes out those colors a little bit. And I kind of like that. I'm going to keep it right around 70 there. I think that creates a nice sky replacement that looks really, really believable. And so I would like that. So now what I would do from this point is, okay, I've got my sky replacement done. I am going to simply apply this. And when we do, it's going to process it. And this will just take a second, of course, as it's doing this, and it will return it into Lightroom Classic, right? So this is the benefit of using it as a plugin. We can take it right out of Lightroom Classic into Luminar Neo, apply our processing, and then simply bring it back. So now we have our image here. Now, what I'm going to do next, and we'll just do this very quickly just so we can kind of show you what we would be doing here, is I would be going to the masking tool inside of Lightroom Classic like we recently did. And I would be choosing my object, and I would select my bird. And now I would go through the process of lightening up my bird a little bit, right? And we would go through this process. I'm doing this very quickly. I'm not really overly concerned with it being perfect. I'm just trying to give you the idea of what we would be doing. That would be our image. That is how easy it is to do a sky replacement. Now, of course, it took us much longer because we were kind of explaining the steps as we went. But we added a sky, and there's really 3 different sections inside of Luminar Neo that we use to fine-tune the adding of the sky into this picture. So it works wonderfully. And I've replaced a lot of skies in Luminar Neo, and I just love how simple it is, how straightforward it is, and you can really make a big impact in a short amount of time. This whole process will typically take maybe 5 minutes or so to bring the photo into there, add your sky, tweak it and refine it, and then bring it back into Lightroom Classic. The next thing that I want to look at in Luminar Neo is adding some sun rays to a photo. So we're going to take a look at this photo now, and you can see that there is naturally a little bit of a sun ray coming out of the side of this photo. It was taken early morning out by the marsh area near where I live here in Charleston, South Carolina, and just beautiful lighting. The bird just hanging up, on that pole. So let's take a look. If we go back into the edit, right, skip those presets, and we come over here, we're going to go down to the sun ray. And so if we just zoom in, you'll see that it says sun ray. And when we do that, it's going to open up. And the first thing it's going to ask us to do is place the sun center. So we're going to click that button. We're going to click place sun center. You see that we get this little dot in our photo. It just places the sun right in there for us. We can now move that around. So what we need to remember whenever we're adding a sun effect, a sun ray and sunlight, is it needs to be in the direction that the sun was coming from when you took the picture. If we took this dot and moved it over here and then tried to add some sun rays to it, it's not going to look right because the sun was never coming from that direction. Our bird is lit up on the top right side of their head and their facial region, and even some along the chest area right here, right? So that's where our bird is lit up. If we add a light source over here to the right, well, that means that their back should be lit up, and it's not. So that is going to become very awkward to the viewer looking at that image. So remember, whenever you're doing this, it has to match up with the natural direction that the sun would have been hitting your subject. So we're going to move this over, and you can bring it right off the page. So I'm going to put it up here in this left-hand corner because that makes sense for where the sun is coming. Then we can come over here into Luminar Neo, and we can add the amount of the sun that we want, of the sun effect. So let's just put it at 40 right now, and then we'll do our tweaking. And we can come back later and either add some or remove some to fine tune it to where we want it and get it to what we think looks good. Now we can go to the overall look. Do we want to reduce this? Do we want to increase it? I'm going to increase it because you can see by reducing it, it darkens down our bird. And I think we're starting to get into a little bit of a kooky look here. The bird's too dark, the sun's too light. It looks a little bit ridiculous for me. So I'm going to come way up on this because I want the bird to be a little bit brighter. Then I'm going to look at the sun rays length, right? Do we want these to be shorter rays? Do we want them to be longer rays? How do we want this to be? So right now, I'm just going to kind of leave them somewhere around 60. Again, these are not final edits. We can come back and tweak these as much or as little as we like to fine tune the rays and get them to what looks good to us and what looks real. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the penetration level of the rays. Do we want to bring them down so the rays aren't quite as strong, or do we want to really bump them up and keep making it so it's almost like a glare? I kind of like that. And then I could back this off a little bit up to the left-hand corner and give it just that little bit of that real hazy look coming. And now when I do that, I might just bring back the sunray length a little bit or bring it up. I'm not sure here. I think I kind of like it right there. So I think we were at 60 a second ago. I think I kind of like it a little bit more towards the 55 range now that we've done that. So that I think kind of looks cool. All right. So now we can go to the next one. Let's go to the sun setting. Now what we can do is we can change the sun radius, right? So if we go up, we're going to make the sun bigger, or we can go down and make it smaller. I think in this case, I would make it bigger because see how we have these different rays coming out? If we make the sun bigger, it kind of fills in some of those rays, and I kind of like that look. I kind of like it looking a little bit more solid as opposed to individual rays. See how that's doing that? So I'm going to go all the way up with that. So it's almost just like a bright ball of light. Now we can change the sun glow radius. So now we're talking about how much is it going to glow around where the sun sits, right? Is it going to expand out, or are we going to shrink it in? So again, we can look at this, bringing it down. This is probably going to give us a little bit more of a ray look, or we can bring it out. I'm going to bring this out because again, I think it does what I'm looking for, and it makes it more like a big ball of light as opposed to individual rays. And then the sun glow amount. So obviously we can make it darker or brighter depending on what we want to do. And I'm going to stick with the brighter, and you can see it even comes down a little bit further into our image. So that's the sun setting. So again, we're just playing here. We're just experimenting, and we're going up and down. We're figuring out what we like and how it looks. So we just did the sun settings. Now we're going to go to the ray settings. And now we can start to kind of mess a little bit with these. Do we want to add more rays to it? Would that be cool? Or do we want to kind of reduce the rays and just give it that big ball of light that we were looking for? So we have some options here to do that too. I don't know if I want to completely get rid of the rays. So I might go to something here. I'm just kind of looking, kind of like it somewhere here. So we see a lot of light coming out. There's a little hint of rays coming through here. I kind of like that and how that looks. So I'm going to leave that here. Now we can randomize it. So it'll basically just change the position of the rays. And you can just do this till you get it to where you like it. So I'm going to go back to where we were here at the beginning. I'm just going to leave it at 0. And that's where I'll keep the rays setting. Last thing that we're going to take a look at is the warmth, right? Let's take a look at the warmth of the sun. Do we want to make it a little bit more orangey, or do we want to make it a little bit more white? This is a early morning sunrise in the summer. So our sun would tend to have a little bit more of orange tones to it, right? It wouldn't be really white. So let's add some warmth to it to make it more believable. And that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to bring this right up to about 80, I think. And I like that. Now we're going to do the same thing with our sun rays, right? They're not going to be white. If the sun has got some warmth and orange tones to it, well, the rays coming off that sun are also going to have those color tones. This is all about making it believable. And many times when you look at an image and you're like, yeah, that's fake, these are the things that are overlooked. People put the sun in the wrong place in the image. So it doesn't make it natural that the light would be coming from there. They don't adjust the warmth of the tones in the image, right? This is a warm summer morning. There would be orange tones. If we have white light, we are killing the vibe of this photo. So we need to make sure that everything matches up with how it would be. And so when you see I go up, we don't necessarily need to go to 80. It may not have the same warm tones as it gets away from the sun. but I do like that right there at around 60. That is it, guys. That is how we add some sun rays to our photo. Now, I think that looks super, super creative. So let's apply that and head back into Lightroom Classic with our new edit. So if we take a look at these two photos here, right, we've got our original and we've got our new one. We've got our original and we've got our new one. I like this, right? We've got this real bright spot on his head and this bright spot on his chest. I like this being a little bit brighter in the left-hand corner. That is a vibe that kind of matches up and corresponds together. And it really makes it look believable. And it really adds a little bit more interest and intrigue into our photos. There you have it, guys. I would love to know, we've talked a lot in this video about different things. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on the use of AI in sky replacements. Do you think you shouldn't do that? Do you think it's okay to do that? And where do you think the lines should be drawn? Would love to know your thoughts on that. What do you think about the sky replacement and sunray effects inside of Luminar Neo? Are you going to give Luminar Neo a try? Let me know that as well in the comments. Would love to know your thoughts there. And other than that, let me know if you use any other programs for these types of edits. I would like to know what you use. And that'll be it for today, guys. I appreciate you spending some time with me, and we will catch you all in the next video. Until then, take care.